Hey guys, this is Kevin. For today's video, I thought I would do a follow-up to one of the topics that I covered a few weeks ago. I have a video where I talked about the things that are more expensive in the Philippines, and I was talking about your electric bill and electronics, computers, that kind of thing. But today I thought what I would do is share about the things that are going to be generally less expensive in the Philippines. I've mentioned that your cost of living usually is going to be less there, and here are some of the things that factor into that. The first thing that's going to be cheaper, generally speaking, in the Philippines is your rent. As I've mentioned, in most places, not Manila, but in most places, you can find a pretty decent place to live for $200 to $300 a month. Now, this is going to be a two to three bedroom apartment. We're not talking about a really big, nice house, although it may be that if you get out in some areas, you could get a pretty nice house for that price. But generally speaking, your rent's going to be $200 to $300, and I cannot imagine many places here in the United States that I would want to live in that cost that. So that's one thing. Another thing that's going to cost less is your transportation. One advantage of living in the Philippines is that especially if you live in more of an urban area, you can get by very easily on public transportation. And I know of guys who have bought cars and just barely use them because it's easier just to hop on a jeepney or something. So when I was there, I remember that transportation was not one of my big expenses for the month. So if you don't want to invest in buying a car and auto insurance and all that stuff, you don't have to do that. Whereas here in the States, in most places, you're going to need a car to get around. And so anyway, transportation is going to be cheaper. Medical is going to be a lot less expensive. Now, I have mentioned that if you have something major done that requires days or weeks of hospitalization, that is going to get you in trouble financially if you can't pay for it. But if you go to see a doctor, like a private hospital, private doctor visit is going to cost you 400 to 500 peso, $10 to $12. If you have to go to a public hospital, I can think of one time I took my wife to a public hospital out in the province because she had a tonsil infection, and I think that doctor visit cost something like 20 peso. So generally speaking, your medical costs are going to be much lower, especially just for routine type things. So those are kind of the big three. A few other things that you're going to find are cheaper in the Philippines. Movies and entertainment. From what I understand, I had to get online to research this because I wanted to see if the price has gone up. But a movie ticket, I think, right now costs around 200 peso. Those who are in the Philippines now, if you want to correct me on that, you can. But your standard movie costs about 200 pesos, so you're talking about $5. An IMAX movie does cost more than that. It costs about 450 pesos, so that's around $10. So if you think about it, that's a pretty cheap movie. If I remember correctly, when I first arrived in the Philippines, movies were only like 50 peso to watch. This was back in 2002. But they've gotten more expensive, but still that's cheaper than here in the States. And I think you'll find that things like that, entertainment type things, are going to be less expensive in the Philippines. For the last thing that I'll mention, the last category is what I call pampering. And what I mean by that is if you go to the Philippines, you can get a professionally done massage for like around $5, around 250 pesos, something like that. That's something that my wife and I did about once a month, something like that. Since we have moved here to the States, we have not had a single massage because it's way out of our price range here. Pardon. But little things like that, or like when my wife would go to the beauty salon or get her nails done, things like that were not expensive at all in the Philippines. And that will lead me over into one final category, and this is kind of an indirect thing, but The cost of labor, generally speaking, is not expensive at all in the Philippines. So anything that involves labor cost is going to be cheaper. So that's why I was mentioning the massage or the pampering, that kind of thing. But even with construction and other type of things, the costs are going to be a lot lower because labor tends to be a lot less expensive. That may or may not directly affect you, but that's just one of the things that I noticed. So anyway, those are some of the things that come to mind in terms of the cost of living in the Philippines and some of the things that are less expensive. I would encourage you to check out a couple of videos I've done. One is about startup costs, and in that video I discussed the fact that you really need a healthy savings account going into the Philippines or an emergency fund. And then I did another video talking about your monthly expenses and how much that's going to cost. And a lot of these other things that I've talked about, rent and medical care and transportation, I have done other videos on those too, so you may want to check those out. So anyway, I hope this helps.